A lot of the stories I tell are stories that I originally heard from my grandfather. May his memory be a blessing. My grandfather first came to this country from Vilna in Lithuania at the end of the last century. He had been a baker's apprentice in Vilna, and when he came to the United States, he continued to follow the baker's trade. And although he was a fine, fine baker, what he loved to do most of all was tell stories. He would tell stories to anyone who would listen. I was his greatest fan. I couldn't get enough of his stories. As a matter of fact, there was a period of about 2 years, I was 10, 11 years old, when his bakery was only 4 or 5 blocks from my parents' house. Anyway, after my parents went to bed, I would get out of bed, get dressed, climb out the bedroom window, run to my grandfather's bakery in hopes of hearing a story, and he never disappointed me. Then I would run back home, climb through the window, get into bed, and when my parents woke up in the morning, there was their darling little boy asleep in his bed. My grandfather's dead now, but he died keeping that secret. Now, my parents are still very much alive, living in Swampscott, Massachusetts. And having just told you this, I have to ask you something. They still don't know about this. So I would just ask you, if you ever have the opportunity to meet my parents, you would please keep this secret. Well, my grandfather told all kinds of stories. He told us about great leaders like Moses and Abraham, great heroes like Bar Kokhba and Judah Maccabee, and a Jewish boy from Chicago named Benny Leonard, who had once been the lightweight boxing champion of the world. He told us about his favorites, the sages Hillel and Akiba, about demons and imps, about fools that made perfect sense to us. And one Sunday morning, I remember I was complaining about my position in life, as young people are prone to do to this very day. And he listened with what now seems like infinite patience. And when I finished, he said, Stevela, let me tell you a story about a man who, like yourself, was unhappy with his position in life. And he spent all his time dreaming about paradise. Whether he was alone or with others, whether he was at work or at rest, he would say to himself, someday I'm going to go to paradise. And one morning, no different than any other, he decided this was the day he was going to go to paradise. So without saying a word to his wife or his 2 children, he rose from his morning table and walked out the door, determined to go to paradise. He went through a gate with a broken latch, walked through a set of fields till he came to the edge of the marketplace. He already knew what women would buy what goods, from what merchants, at what price, and what they would argue about. He passed a butcher shop opposite a bakery, through another set of fields. He climbed a steep hill until he stood on the edge of a long, broad plateau. But before walking along that plateau, he turned and took one last look at his village, because certainly he would never see it again. He was a man destined for paradise. All day long, he walked along that plateau until the sun was setting in the west, and he decided to take shelter under a huge pine tree. But before going to bed, he took off his shoes and he pointed them in the direction he was certain paradise lay in. But how was he to know that in the darkest hour of the night, a demon, an imp, would come, and either to teach him a lesson, or maybe to save him, or maybe to punish him, or maybe, just as a practical joke, would take his shoes and turn them around? No way for the man to know that. He rose early the next morning, said his prayers, and stepped into his shoes, certain that they would take him to paradise. And he walked along that plateau till he came to the edge of it, and there it was below him, paradise. He had arrived. Strange. It's not much bigger than my own village. Oh well. He descended the hill into the center of town, and here too in paradise there was a synagogue and a town hall, and he stopped to look up at them, and he thought, you know, they've lied to me all these years, or certainly exaggerated. They told me everything in paradise would shine and gleam, but this, It's almost as shabby as my own village. And when he passed a butcher shop opposite a bakery, he suspected that when he got to the marketplace, he would know what women would buy what goods from what merchants at what price and what they would argue about, and he did. And now, more out of sadness than out of anger, he had no doubts that if he continued through those fields, he would come to a gate with a broken latch. And yes, he did. And as he was leaning on the gate, pondering his situation, he heard a whining voice from the house. Come in and eat your food. It was enough to drive a man mad. It sounded just like his own wife. But, never having said no to his own wife, and being a little bit hungry, the man went in. He sat at the table. He had a little herring, a little black bread, a little coffee. 2 children ran up to him, jumped in his lap. The youngest one started to twirl his beard and said, Daddy, Daddy, you'll stay with us this time, won't you? And not wanting to disappoint the children, the man agreed. And you know, Stevella, my grandfather concluded, that man to this very day sits at his table having his coffee every morning, still trying to figure out whether he's in paradise or not.